Well, good evening, good morning. The music we just heard was from the 16th of May, 1954. And in Pondicherry, where some of our friends sit, it is the 16th. How could I ignore that? We are in Chapter 5, The Cosmic Illusion, Mind, Dream, and Hallucination. And we saw that Sri Aurobindo has a long and pivotal quotation from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad right at the start of the chapter, describing states of consciousness, linking sleep and wakefulness. We'll be coming to that. This chapter began by tracing the human experience as it unrolls first in a positive attempt to capture all that it can from life and to affirm itself, but foiled and turned back again and again, and how it comes to look at these contraries, knowing that we're rising out of ignorance. Still, the human spirit strives to attain lasting value, complete satisfaction, a sense of solidity in its existence. When it fails to do that, then philosophically, it reflects a view in the physical mind of a kind of agnosticism. Maybe we just don't know what is going on. A second, in our vital and affective being, we feel disappointed. And when we think rationally about it, we wonder whether there is anything here at all. Is it all simply an illusion? So, the fact that the entire vehicle of the human, physical, vital, and mental, suffers what it seems to be a fundamental and recurring disappointment, makes it regard the world as something which is perhaps unreal, leaves us with a choice facing this frustration, where we see the great thinkers of India and the persons of Buddha and Shankara turning away from the world, canceling our conscious participation in it. And is this the right thing to do? Where we left off last week was positing a universal realism against a negativing illusionism. Which of these two is correct? So he continues his analysis with this next paragraph. In itself, and by itself, the vital being's aversion, the life mind's recoil from life, cannot be taken as valid or conclusive. Its strongest motive is a sense of disappointment and an acceptance of frustration, which has no greater claim to conclusiveness than the idealist's opposite motive of invariable hope and his faith and will to realize. Nevertheless, there is a certain validity in the mental support of this sense of frustration, in the perception at which the thinking mind arrives that there is an illusion behind all human effort and terrestrial endeavor, the illusion of his political and social gospels, the illusion of his ethical efforts at perfection, the illusion of philanthropy and service, the illusion of works, the illusion of fame, power, success, the illusion of all achievement. Human social and political endeavor turns always in a circle and leads nowhere. Man's life and nature remain always the same, always imperfect, and neither laws, nor institutions, nor education, nor philosophy, nor morality, nor religious teachings have succeeded in producing the perfect man, still less a perfect humanity. Straighten the tail of the dog as you will, it has been said, it always resumes its natural curve of crookedness. Altruism, philanthropy and service, Christian love, or Buddhist compassion have not made the world a whit happier. They only give infinitesimal bits of momentary relief here and there, throw drops on the fire of the world's suffering. All aims are in the end transitory and futile, all achievements unsatisfying or evanescent. All works are so much labor of effort and success and failure which consummate nothing definitive. Whatever changes are made in human life are of the form only, and these forms pursue each other in a futile circle. For the essence of life, its general character remains the same forever. This view of things may be exaggerated, but it has an undeniable force. It is supported by the experience of man's centuries, and it carries in itself a significance which at one time or another comes upon the mind with an overwhelming air of self-evidence. Not only so, but if it is true that the fundamental laws and values of terrestrial existence are fixed, or that it must always turn in repeated cycles, and this has been for long a very prevalent notion, then this view of things in the end is hardly escapable. For imperfection, ignorance, frustration, and suffering are a dominant factor of the existing world order. The elements contrary to them, knowledge, happiness, success, perfection, are constantly found to be deceptive or inconclusive. The two opposites are so inextricably mixed that if this state of things is not a motion towards a greater fulfillment, if this is the permanent character of the world order, then it is hard to avoid the conclusion that all here is either the creation of an inconscient energy, which would account for the incapacity of an apparent consciousness to arrive at anything, or intentionally a world of ordeal and failure, the issue being not here but elsewhere, or even a vast and aimless cosmic illusion. So in a sense, the frustration of the life force that we experience here justifies in part this philosophic consideration. We try and we try, we go round and round, we always come back to the same thing. Our ideals crash and burn. We never achieve what we think we would, we shall, or will we ever achieve anything. There is undeniably some truth in that, but for us to forecast in the future and say that it must always be so is to accept that the laws of life that we have experienced to this point are forever, that they are eternally fixed, and that there can be no progress. If we accept that, then we must conclude that everything is either the creation of this inconscient energy, which he says would account for the apparent incapacity of the world to achieve anything, or that there is a divine will, and it intentionally orders upon us a world of ordeal and failure, and that we're meant to go someplace else. We're meant to exit the universe, and then we have to explain why we're here at all. Or worst, that it's actually a cosmic illusion that we're dealing with. So, a couple of words that have popped up here, which we'll meet again. Evanescent means vanishing. It's not the same thing as transient. Transience is something that comes into being, stays for a while, begins to wither away and atrophy, and then goes away completely. Evanescence means poof, it's gone in a puff. It vanishes. And when he says the issue being not here but elsewhere, issue means a flowing out. So we are taking an exit to get to a different universe to find resolution to the cosmic riddle in that particular view. That may be true even if we find that the universe is an illusion. So, the next paragraph. Among these alternative conclusions, the second, as it is usually put before us, offers no ground for the philosophic reason, since we have no satisfying indication of the connection between the here and the elsewhere, which are posited against each other, but not explained in the inevitability of their relations. And there is no light cast on the necessity or fundamental significance of the ordeal and failure. It could only be intelligible, except as the mysterious will of an arbitrary creator, if there was a choice by immortal spirits to try the adventure of the ignorance, and a necessity for them to learn the nature of a world of ignorance in order that they might reject it. So, a strange justification, I think you'd agree. But such a creative motive, necessarily incidental and quite temporary in its incidence, with the earth as its casual field of experience, could hardly by itself account for the immense and enduring phenomenon of this complex universe. So here he's referring to this whole thing being pivoted upon the soul gaining this perspective through the human experience. So really, we've created the entire universe, vast as it is, so that the human on this globe can have this experience and say, aha, all is illusion, and we leave the riddle to go back, quote, home. That's why he amusingly calls it a creative motive. It can become an objective part of a satisfactory explanation if this world is the field for the working out of a greater creative motive, if it is a manifestation of a divine truth or a divine possibility in which, under certain conditions, and initiating ignorance must intervene as a necessary factor. And if the arrangement of this universe contains in it a compulsion of the ignorance to move towards knowledge, of the imperfect manifestation to grow into perfection, of the frustration to serve as steps towards a final victory, of the suffering to prepare an emergence of the divine delight of being. So he's just given you the picture of his own view. Yes, if immortal spirits descend here into the adventure of the ignorance, if there is this cosmic purpose underlying it, then it would be justifiable. Not as a quick immersion, discover how ignorant it is to leave, but rather to propel all forward. All the apparent denial of being, consciousness, and delight to come into full flower again. In that case, he says, the sense of disappointment, frustration, illusion, and the vanity of all things would not be valid, for the aspects that seem to justify it would be only the natural circumstances of a difficult evolution. All the stress of struggle and effort, success and failure, joy and suffering, the mixture of ignorance and knowledge would be the experience needed for the soul, mind, life, and physical part to grow into the full light of a spiritual, perfected being. It would reveal itself as the process of an evolutionary manifestation. There would be no need to bring in the fiat of an arbitrary omnipotence or a cosmic illusion, a fantasy of meaningless Maya, the world would be full of meaning, even the ignorance, part of a meaningful mystery that we will unravel as we evolve. So, the premise of the argument is, if the future is bright evolutionarily, then frustration has a temporary purpose and doesn't justify our canceling our participation in the universe to hie away into the transcosmic. This would be a different philosophic view. Continuing, but there is too a higher mental and spiritual basis for the philosophy of world negation, and here we are on more solid ground, for it can be contended that the world is in its very nature an illusion, and no reasoning from the features and circumstances of an illusion could justify it or raise it into a reality. There is only one reality, the transcendent, the supracosmic. No divine fulfillment, even if our life were to grow into the life of gods, could nullify or cancel the original unreality which is its fundamental character. For that fulfillment would be only the bright side of an illusion. This would be the position of certain schools of Advaita Vedanta led by Adi Shankaracharya. Shankara, whom you may have looked at if you saw the links that I sent to you and downloaded the PDFs of the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad and the Mandukya Upanishad. I sent some citations from the second book in the Brihad Aranyaka, but also the very ones that Sri Aurobindo cited here are meant to look at as well. And you see how Shankara argues for the unreality of the world. Only the consciousness of the self, identical with Brahman, being the single reality. So whether we're awake or asleep, only that consciousness of the self is really real. And all of these steps, these stadia, leading from one world to the next, are not real in themselves. Only the self is real. Hence, Sri Aurobindo converting that into this sentence: there is only one reality, the transcendent, the supracosmic. The entire process of life, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, is fundamentally fictional. So even if we were to lead an evolutionary path in the Mayavadins' view, from being first grounded in the ignorance to eventually a divine fulfillment, would be a fictional process. It does not exist. Back to Sri Aurobindo now. Or even if not absolutely an illusion, it would be a reality of an inferior order and must come to an end by the soul's recognition that the Brahman alone is true, that there is nothing but the transcendent and immutable absolute. If this is the one truth, then all ground is cut away from under our feet. The divine manifestation, the victory of the soul in matter, its mastery over existence, the divine life in nature, would itself be a falsehood, or at least something not altogether real, imposed for a time on the sole true reality. But here, all turns on the mind's conception, or the mental being's experience of reality, and how far that conception is valid, or how far that experience is imperative. Even if it is a spiritual experience, how far it is absolutely conclusive, solely imperative. And again, Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is pinned to experience. As he views the Upanishads having been pregnant utterances from realized sages, and it was the sages' experience of the truths of Brahman and the Atman that gave them force and power and have lasted to this day. Shankara's philosophy is founded a little differently. He calls not upon the experiences of the sages, but that the texts exist, the Shruti exists in the form of the Upanishads, and therefore those are real. He doesn't call to experience, he calls to the Shruti to found his philosophy, an important distinction that we need to come back to. Let's continue. The cosmic illusion is sometimes envisaged, though that is not the accepted position, as something that has the character of an unreal, subjective experience. It is then, or may be, a figure of forms and movements that arises in some eternal sleep of things or in a dream consciousness, and is temporarily imposed on a pure and featureless self-aware existence. It is a dream that takes place in the infinite. As Vishnu, the Supreme, dreams the world into being. So fundamentally, it is a subjective experience, robbing it of objective reality. It is merely a mood, merely a passing wave on the consciousness of the infinite, so cannot have any real reality. Temporarily imposed, as he says, on a pure and featureless self-aware existence. In the philosophies of the Mayavadins, for there are several systems alike in their basis, but not altogether and at every point coincident with each other, and this is an important sentence or phrase. There are many schools, and some of them bear strong comparison with Sri Aurobindo, which do not annul the universe as a reality, but rather incorporate it into a larger. It is a group of Advaita Vedanta schools which take that position, and not all of them. In the philosophies of the Mayavadins, the analogy of dream is given, but as an analogy only, not as the intrinsic character of the world illusion. So he, by the way, is not speaking here of the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad itself, cited on the first page of this chapter, but of the commentaries upon it by Mayavadins, those who regard the world as the creation of Maya, a cunning cheat. And we don't accept a diminution of Maya into being a cunning cheat. It is their vision, not ours. It is difficult for the positive physical mind to admit the idea that ourselves, the world, and life, the sole thing to which our consciousness bears positive witness, are inexistent, a cheat imposed on us by that consciousness. Certain analogies are brought forward, the analogies especially of dream and hallucination, in order to show that it is possible for the experiences of the consciousness to seem to it real, and yet prove to be without any basis or without a sufficient basis in reality. As a dream is real to the dreamer so long as he sleeps, but waking shows it to be unreal, so our experience of world seems to us positive and real, but when we stand back from the illusion, we shall find that it had no reality. but it may be as well to give the dream analogy its full value and see whether our sense of world experience has in any way a similar basis. For the idea of the world as a dream, whether it be a dream of the subjective mind, or a dream of the soul, or a dream in the eternal, is often entertained, and it powerfully enforces the illusionist tendency in human feeling and thinking. If it has no validity, we must definitely see that and the reasons of its inapplicability and set it aside well out of the way. If it has some validity, we must see what it is and how far it goes. If the world is an illusion, but not a dream illusion, that distinction too must be put on a secure basis. Dream is felt to be unreal first because it ceases and has no farther validity when we pass from one status of consciousness to another, which is our normal status. But this is not by itself a sufficient reason, for it may well be that there are different states of consciousness, each with its own realities. If the consciousness of one state of things fades back and its contents are lost, or, even when caught in memory, seem to be illusory as soon as we pass into another state, that would be perfectly normal. But it would not prove the reality of the state in which we now are and the unreality of the other which we have left behind us. So he's examining here whether dream is the right analogy to use to describe the manifestation of the world out of Satchit Ananda, out of conscious existence whose nature is delight. So, can dream serve as part of the reasoning for that? First, he's suspicious of argument by analogy. Second, can we discredit dreams? Because first, dreams end. And we move from one line of awareness to another. Does that passage from one to the other demerit the one that we're leaving and merit the one that we're going to? Is there a continent of consciousness behind which contains the two? What is the context in which consciousness shifts from one reality to the other? Is one canceled simply because we have moved from a previous state to an eventual state? If earth circumstances, he says, begin to seem unreal to a soul passing into a different world or another plane of consciousness, that would not prove their unreality. Similarly, the fact that world existence seems unreal to us when we pass into the spiritual silence or into some nirvana does not of itself prove that the cosmos was all the time an illusion. So we can have the experience of nirvana and yet the world be valid. It must be so. Sri Aurobindo had the experience of nirvana and found that it did not cancel the world out, but he had a greater experience than nirvana, in which nirvana continued to be part of the backdrop of a grander consciousness, and yet fulfilled completely the world's truth and its eventual direction. And remember that it's analogical reasoning of the Mayavadins which would render the world dreamlike or illusory. Back to Sri Aurobindo. The world is real to the consciousness dwelling in it, and unconditioned existence is real to the consciousness absorbed in nirvana. that is all that is established. In other words, to the percipient, both worlds, both realms are real. If you're engrossed in the world, it's real to you. If you're engrossed in nirvana, nirvana is real to you. That's all that established by having either experience. But the second reason for refusing credit to our sleep experience is that a dream is something evanescent, vanishing, without antecedents and without a sequel. So, the first argument was that dreams end. The second is that dreams are evanescent. They simply go away. They come without being bidden, and they have no sequel. There's nothing left of the story once they end. Ordinarily, too, it is without any sufficient coherence or any significance intelligible to our waking being. If our dreams wore like our waking life an aspect of coherence, each night taken up and carrying farther a past, continuous, and connected sleep experience, as each day takes up again our waking world experience, then dreams would assume to our mind quite another character. So dream continuity is missing. If we can pause for a moment and, as a sidebar, mention that Mother, Sri Aurobindo's radiant collaborator, suggested to those living around her in the ashram that they could make sleep and dream experience itself a further field for yogic development by building dream life consciously, by not simply accepting passively the occurrence of dreams and feeling powerless within them as if you're driven from circumstance to circumstance, but encouraging the dreamer to become soul awake and a participant in the dream. And if you don't like the direction the dream is going, change it, make it go to a better direction. Better still, make the dream an extension of yogic growth, in which one is exploring world after world inwardly, and unifying further the being, and taking inside the day's experience and fulfilling it, and then preparing it, all within the dreamscape, and then returning to the waking world. So in this way, there is no break in the yogic awareness. I might also mention that Ramana Maharshi said, just as waking life is different for the self-realized sage, so is sleep different to the self-realized sage. So to be deeply possessed of your own nature and to use the sleep and dream experiences as important connectors by which we achieve fuller integration is a signally important thing for a yogin to work upon. Okay, the sidebar is over. So what he has spoken about here is that there is distinct orders of consciousness, and there is no analogy simply between a dream and a waking life. They're different in character. They are different orders of conscious being. To continue, our life is accused of evanescence, vanishing, and often it is accused too as a whole of a lack of inner coherence and significance. But its lack of complete significance may be due to our lack of limitation of understanding. Actually, when we go within and begin to see it from within, it assumes a complete connected significance. At the same time, whatever lack of inner coherence was felt before disappears, and we see that it was due to the incoherence of our own inner seeing and knowledge, and was not at all a character of life. Another quick sidebar, Sri Aurobindo deeply examined his dream life from yogic perspective, which you can read in his record of yoga. He used it as a means of mapping his consciousness and connecting present to past and to future as he developed the power of Trikala Drishti, the triple vision of time, past, present, and future, all in one eternal glance. He carried that with him from the waking state into the sleeping state. There is no surface incoherence in life. It rather appears to our minds as a chain of firm sequences, and if that is a mental delusion, as is sometimes alleged, if the sequence is created by our minds and does not actually exist in life, that does not remove the difference of the two states of consciousness. For, in dream, the coherence given by an observing inner consciousness is absent, and whatever sense of sequence there is seems to be due to a vague and false imitation of the connections of waking life, a subconscious mimesis imitation. But this imitative sequence is shadowy and imperfect, fails and breaks always, and is often wholly absent. We see, too, that the dream consciousness seems to be wholly devoid of that control which the waking consciousness exercises to a certain extent over life circumstances. It has the nature automatism of a subconscious construction, and nothing of the conscious will and organizing force of the evolved mind of the human being. So, dream seems to imitate waking life. And dreams seem to happen to us without our evident support. Again, he writes, the evanescence of a dream is radical. Radical means getting to the root. And one dream has no connection with another. But the evanescence of the waking life is of details. There is no evidence of evanescence in the connected totality of world experience. So the analogy fails. Our bodies perish, but souls proceed from birth to birth through the ages. Stars and planets may disappear after a lapse of eons or of many light cycles, but universe, cosmic existence, may well be a permanent, as it is certainly a continuous activity. There is nothing to prove that the infinite energy which creates it has an end or a beginning either of itself or of its action. So far, there is too great a disparateness between dream life and waking life to make the analogy applicable. So, he's standing firmly on the side of the continuous reality of the soul and souls who descend into the cosmos, and of the cosmos itself to be a continuous activity within being. Even if you cancel out this universe, there is a universe in the offing. There is always a manifestation of the eternal in time. It does not go out of being, and you never go out of being more than in passing show. So to try to connect these great realities in terms of the analogy with what little we know of sleep and waking life is incorrect. Again, the analogy collapses. And he'll continue the argument, and we will continue the argument with him next week. Let's look at a section from Savitri tonight, which I think amply reflects upon the great realities Sri Aurobindo has been affirming here. This is from Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, Canto 4 of the Secret Knowledge. The Master of Existence lurks in us, and plays at hide and seek with his own force. In nature's instrument loiters secret God. The immanent lives in man as in his house. He has made the universe his pastimes field, a vast gymnasium of his works of might. All-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. Divine, wears shapes of animal or man. Eternal, he assents to fate and time. Immortal, dallies with mortality. The all-conscious ventured into ignorance. The all-blissful bore to be insensible. Incarnate in a world of strife and pain, he puts on joy and sorrow like a robe, and drinks experience like a strengthening wine. He whose transcendence rules the pregnant vasts, prescient now, dwells in our subliminal depths, a luminous individual power alone. The Absolute, the Perfect, the Alone, has called out of the silence his mute force, where she lay in the featureless and formless hush, guarding from time by her immobile sleep the ineffable puissance of his solitude. The Absolute, the Perfect, the Alone, has entered with his silence into space. He has fashioned these countless persons of one self. He has built 1,000,000 figures of his power. He lives in all, who lived in his vast alone. Space is himself, and time is only he. The Absolute, the Perfect, the Immune, one who is in us as our secret self, our mask of imperfection has assumed. He has made this tenement of flesh his own, his image in the human measure cast, that to his divine measure we might rise. Then, in a figure of divinity, the Maker shall recast us and impose a plan of Godhead on the mortal's mold, lifting our finite minds to his infinite, touching the moment with eternity. This transfiguration is earth's due to heaven. A mutual debt binds man to the Supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key. But meanwhile, all is a shadow cast by a dream, and to the musing and immobile spirit, life and himself don the aspect of a myth, the burden of a long, unmeaning tale, for the key is hid and by the inconscient kept. The secret God beneath the threshold dwells. In a body obscuring the immortal spirit, a nameless resident vesting unseen powers with matter's shapes and motives beyond thought, and the hazard of an unguessed consequence, an omnipotent, indiscernible influence, he sits, unfelt by the form in which he lives, and veils his knowledge by the groping mind. A wanderer in a world his thoughts have made, he turns in a chiaroscuro of error and truth to find a wisdom that on high is his. As one forgetting, he searches for himself. As if he had lost an inner light, he seeks. As a sojourner lingering amid alien scenes, he journeys to a home he knows no more. His own self's truth he seeks, who is the truth. He is the player who became the play. He is the thinker who became the thought. He is the many who was the silent one. In the symbol figures of the cosmic force, and in her living and inanimate signs, and in her complex tracery of events, he explores the ceaseless miracle of himself, till the thousand-fold enigma has been solved in the single light of an all-witnessing soul. Namaste. Jai Ma.